Good evening. Hello, hello. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to ICALA. My name is Alberto Keosian, and I am the Learning and Engagement Coordinator here at the museum. Thank you all for joining us tonight. It is so lovely to see the room so full, and we're especially grateful to be in collaboration with our friends at Gyopo. As a volunteer-powered organization grounded in values of belonging, care, and learning, Gyopo's work deeply resonates with how ICALA approaches public programming, making this evening's partnership truly special. Tonight's program, The Evolution of Ancestral Spiritual Practices, is presented in conjunction with our current exhibition, Speaking in Tongues. Speaking in Tongues brings together an intergenerational group of artists who engage the spiritual as a space of knowledge, survival, and connection, while exploring forms of expression that often exist beyond conventional frameworks of language and belief. We're also honored to be joined by Speaking in Tongues featured artist Marwa Abdul-Rahman. Her work, alongside that of all of our participants tonight, invites us to consider how ancestral knowledge is carried, adapted, and experienced across diasporic communities today. With that, I'd like to warmly invite our collaborators to share a few words. Please join me in welcoming Gyopo.
Hi, everyone. So nice to see all of you. My name is Alex Peck, and I am one of the chairs of the Kyopo Program Committee and serve on the steering committee there, along with Kathy Choi. We're so pleased to co-present this program with ICALA on the occasion of this fantastic new exhibition. I spent like an hour here before the program, and it was just so wonderful to get me in the mood for this program. So congratulations, Amanda, on a great show. Kyopo is a volunteer-powered nonprofit that organizes free public programs and projects connected to diasporic Korean arts and culture in Los Angeles and beyond, so that we can build a robust intergenerational and intersectional community through collectively organizing free programs on arts and culture. Our programs connect cultural producers working across fields in order to, one, interrogate the conditions we are in, two, hone our critical faculties, and three, shine light on repressed histories and center peoples marginalized even in our own diaspora. All of this is in service of better understanding ourselves so that we can together build and imagine new worlds that we can all thrive in. We're a volunteer-powered organization, so if you're interested in getting involved, please don't be shy to approach me or any of the volunteers here. We have some volunteers scattered throughout, so Ewan's waving her hand, or we'll be manning the tables after the event. So come chat with us. We'd love to get to know you. And there are also some QR codes scattered around if you want to sign up for our newsletter. We have a very special treat before I introduce the moderator. Pānquetzani of Indigemama will be leading us or be performing a song for us that'll help return us to our homes and our bodies. So please join me in welcoming Pānquetzani.
Solo los marineritos que navegan por el mar. Ay, solita y soledad, soledad del que decía. Ay, soledad, soledad del que decía. De noche te vengo a ver. Ay, soledad, de noche te vengo a ver, porque no puedo de día. Ay, soledad, porque no puedo de día. your eyes. This is the place where we download from the ancestral archives. This is our highest self. When we talk about, I want this for my highest self, it comes from this space. Visualize your aura like a crystalline balloon or bubble all around your body. I want you to feel safe and happy, bringing joy in from your bones. Because what's the point of humaning if you're not going to enjoy it, right? From your feet, you're gonna pull up earth energy. You're gonna feel it breaking through the concrete of this building. Because you are worthy and deserving. Go ahead and feel your own energy circulate in your body. Allowing it to spiral and multiply. Al pasar por el panteón, me dije una calavera. Al pasar por el panteón, me dije una calavera. Le cantaré yo el son. ¡Ay, soledad! Le cantaré yo el son. ¡Ay, de la petenera! ¡Ay, de la petenera! Pero en tono de menor. I want you to have a Star Wars moment and visualize the stars. You're seeing the stars, and I want you to find one that feels like home. And bring that star energy in through the top of your head. Ay, solita y soledad, soledad del campo santo. Ay, ay, soledad, soledad del campo santo. Yo me acuesto en el rincón. Ay, soledad, yo me acuesto en el rincón, porque en la orilla me espanto. Thank you so much for journeying with me.
Thank you so much for that, Panke. I think, as you can see, a lot of us came here hungry, and thank you so much for setting the table for us so beautifully so we can receive this. I'm very excited to introduce the moderator of our discussion, Duncan Ryuken Williams. He is currently the Alton Brooks Professor of Religion and the Director of the Shinso Ito Center for Japanese Religions and Culture at USC. Previously, he held the Ito Distinguished Chair of Japanese Buddhism at UC Berkeley and served as the Director of Berkeley's Center for Japanese Studies. He has also been ordained since 1993 as a Buddhist priest in the Soto Zen tradition, served as the Buddhist chaplain at Harvard University, where he received his PhD, and received Dharma transmission in 2024 at Kotakuji Temple in Nagano, Japan. His monographs include American Sutra, A Story of Faith and Freedom in the Second World War, the winner of the 2022 Grawemeyer Religion Award, and a New York LA Times bestseller, and The Other Side of Zen. He is also the editor of 7 volumes on race and American belonging or Buddhist studies, including Hapa Japan, Issei Buddhism in the Americas, American Buddhism, and Buddhism and Ecology. His most recent project is the building of the Irei Names Monument, a memorial to honor those of Japanese ancestry who were incarcerated in America's internment and concentration camps during World War II. Please join me in welcoming Duncan Williams.
Okay, that was a very formal introduction. We're going to be fairly informal, I think, today, just in the spirit of where we are. And Pānque, thank you so much for setting creating the setting for this evening. We're going to be discussing for, I think, half the time in a kind of structured way the theme for today. I think everybody already knows the title, so I'm not going to go through it, but we're going to be talking about ancestral spiritual practice. We're going to be talking about evolution. We're going to be talking about diaspora. We're going to be talking about creativity, all of those type of things in the first half. And the second half, I view as a chance for everybody gathered. We're all here equal. This is, I view it like a conversation, not just between the 3, of course, important spiritual practitioners we have with us today, but all of us. And in my tradition of Soto Zen Buddhism, we have a practice called Dharma combat, which sounds a little bit aggressive, but it's basically, we say we shoot an arrow in the air, and when somebody needs to answer a question, you need to shoot down the arrow that's been shot. So we're going to put our people to test today. You're going to ask questions, and they're going to try to shoot down your arrow. So that's the framework of today. And so it's very loose. We don't know what's going to happen. Because we don't know what your questions are, and they don't really know what my questions are to them. So what I wanted to do at the top, though, was to ask them, basically, instead of me reading their bio or something, I want them to self-introduce themselves. In my lineage, we have a text called Genjo Koan, where it says, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by the 10,000 things of the universe. And so I feel like the first thing we need to do to kind of set ourselves up is to have the 3 people give you a self-introduction about who they are as people that work with spiritual practices. But maybe not just self-introduce, like, what's your favorite Netflix show? But like more like, you can do that too. But if you could, maybe the prompt will be about ancestors. I want to start with ancestors, right? In my lineage, we chant the names of ancestors, those who've come before us, those who've taught us, and that we belong to a lineage, a tradition. And I know later we're going to be talking about the evolution and adaptations in diaspora in our contemporary times, but we all are linked to very ancient practices of different kinds. And so that's going to be my first question to you, is to kind of self-introduce to everybody here, just as a sharing of your spiritual practice, your lineage, who are you kind of in line with, who are your ancestors. So, Jen, why don't we, you're closest, why don't we just go down the line and see how we do.
My name is Mudang Jenn. I'm a Korean American shaman initiated in Korea in 2016. Part of my practice has been to confront shamanism and spiritual practices, especially when it asks us to investigate where our roots are, where our stories are, and where our belonging is. And when we look at the practices of shamanism from the past or during occupation, we could look to answers of how to navigate these practices. And so my practice has been an investigation of what that could look like for the diaspora, especially when we don't have connections to the land, to the lineage, or to the language.
Marwa, Goofy, you can.
Hi, my name is Marwa Abdul-Rahman, and I am an artist and a spirit worker. So the spirit work that I do is kind of separate. Looks like it's separated into two dimensions. I channel my artwork in my studio as an artist, and it's a somatic process by which I translate spirit language, which is nonverbal, directly into my materials through my body. I feel as though I am literally being physically pushed around by energetic or invisible forces that I now recognize as my spirit guides to make my work. And while I don't know what my painting is going to look like at the end, they don't even give me any details about it, but they do at the very end, when I'm almost finished, tell me what the themes are and what to expect, how this painting is going to work. So these three paintings that I have in the show in the back actually are about ancestors and ancestral tending. And I consider the finished paintings portals. So when you stand in front of them, they will be activated and working directly with the viewer, because art is a visual language and it's much closer to spirit language than any verbal language that I know. So when you stand in front of these three paintings, it will be doing the work of ancestral healing. And the other practice that I have is a soul tending practice, something I call soul tending, which is I work with clients one-on-one and work in the spirit world. And I do I enter and to see what actually needs work. I will introduce myself in the spirit world to the ancestors, along with my ancestors and the beings that I work with, to the ancestors of the client. And then we start working from there. I am particularly good at removing curses and doing depossessions and death work. I do something called death walking, which is opening up portals and allowing people who have passed, who are stuck here, to actually move on to another dimension and continue their work. Ethnically, I'm Egyptian. I was raised here by Muslim parents, and I still have a very strong connection to the country and the land, because all of my extended family is there, and my parents used to send me there all the time to know the language and the culture and just to be part of the Egyptian community. But Egypt was conquered by a series of historical conquests. And so the ancient and animistic practices that were used in spiritual work were actually very heavily influenced by the Abrahamic faiths, and they were considered, you couldn't do them anymore. They were like prohibited. And or they were like woven in with scripture from the Islamic and the Christian faiths. And so I couldn't learn from anyone who I knew actually to do the things that I do now. Instead, I searched for a teacher. It was really just a lot of praying and asking and waiting until I found someone who could teach me. She was not from my lineage, but she taught me how to make really strong connections with allies in the spirit world and to find this lineage that had the necessary undiluted animistic work that they wanted to have me bring through. And so I learned directly from my ancestors how to do the specific work that I do now. And that's just, in a nutshell, what I do.
Thank you, Pānque.
Is this on? Yeah, okay, I'm back in your ears. My name is Pānquetzani, and I practice Mexican traditional medicine, and I work primarily with wombs and families. If you take a look at the entrance to the right, there's a book called Thriving Postpartum. That is my book. I wrote it. It's about the sacred 40 days after giving birth. I believe that families are the pillars of community, and mothers are the pillar of the family. And we all have a responsibility to hold up women, hold up mothers, hold up babies and families, especially today in society where there's so much violence against women. We feel that in our bodies. Even if it doesn't happen to us, it's happening at a great scale. And so I do womb healing. And not only is it spiritual, but I put my hands on you. And in Mexican traditional medicine, we believe that your womb, all of your organs have a specific location to work optimally in your body. And if your organs are not in those specific places, then what happens is you feel off in your life. And those corresponding organs will impact negatively different parts of your life. And so folks come to me for abundance, for fertility, to get rid of period pain. And I literally, using my hands, massage their organs into place. It's not always painless. I wanted to name my ancestors, my Abuela Alma, my grandma Alma, she's alive, but I wanted to name her as one of my teachers. And my Abuela Olga, I'm the great-granddaughter of Amelia and Hortensia and Rafaela. I'm great-great-granddaughter to Josefita and Petra and Agustina. And great-great-great-granddaughter to Joaquinita Sofia. And great-great-great-great-great, I think I got that right, granddaughter to Pio Quinta.
Thank you for all of you for bringing up where you are in these lineages. I feel like the next thing I want to invite you to just reflect on a little bit. You know, Pānque started talking about families and connection to, in some sense, also lineages or ancestors and the practice of healing. Because I think spiritual work, kind of more broadly speaking, all of you are really engaged in different kinds of healing. And I want to kind of unpack that a little bit further in each of your cases, and maybe ask you to specifically, I mean, you mentioned death walking, and I know, in Korean, shamanistic practice, you may often connect to the spirits of ancestors. So that's another, I think, dimension of ancestors that I want to unpack a little bit about the relationship between connecting to the spirits of ancestors, as well as other kinds of spirits, and your kind of healing work. For example, in my tradition, typically, for example, the point where most people need healing is when a loved one's passed away, right? And as Buddhist priests, we often have a structure for how to handle that. There'll be the wake, the funeral, and then it doesn't end at the funeral, right? Shonanoka, the first 7th-day ceremony. We have something called Shijukunchi, 49th day ceremony. That's the one where we believe the spirits of the recently passed away person kind of departs to a different realm. And then, but we don't stop there. There's a 1-year ceremony, a 3-year ceremony, 7-year, up to 33 years. Because I guess in the olden days, typically people didn't remember more than 33 years ago, somebody. So we end at 33 years. And then at the 33-year point, they join the senzo, the ancestors. That's kind of the structure. And we also have, annual, like Obon, summer ancestral festivals, where we invite all of the ancestors to come back momentarily for a period of time, where we have offerings of ceremony and dance, Obon dancing, different things and then we let them go again. So it's kind of like inviting them, letting go, inviting, letting go. And it's all for the purpose of remembrance, but also of in some sense, consoling, not just the spirits that are past, but consoling the people left behind, the living. And that we do this kind of dual practice. So anyway, I'm just giving you time to think about what in your lineage or what in your practice could you connect to that kind of idea of connecting with the spirits of the ancestors and the work of healing.
Do you want to stay in order?
You can no, let's go in whoever is moved.
Repeat the question, please. Some people forget in 33 years. I forget in 33 seconds.
I would love to hear a little bit more about all of your work on healing, but specifically if there is a connection to kind of thinking about spirits of ancestors as you're doing that healing.
Before I put my hands on anyone, I thank them and I ask permission to their ancestors. May I work on your daughter? Please, will you give me permission? And I offer them smoke, copal, sage, tobacco, cedar, and of course, I get a yes because the person comes in there willingly. And I ask for the highest, most benevolent ancestors to be present, because some of us have trickster ancestors and unhealed ancestors, and we don't want trouble. We want healing. And so I call them into the space and I ask them to guide my hands in the most loving and powerful way for this person so that they could receive the healing that they need. And what their ancestors have me do is sometimes like weird. I just allow myself to be a vessel. Not only my hands, but my heart. Sometimes I'll say things. There was this one time where a woman, I kept seeing a man, right? And he was like all fresh with his hat and like tall. And I was like, do you have like a grandfather who's like tall? He's really handsome. He's black and has a hat and a suit. And she's like, nope. And I was like, but he kept telling me, tell her I'm here, tell her I'm here. I was like, I already told her you're here. And then, so finally I said, well, this man says that he's here. And she just starts crying. And she said, that's my grandfather on my father's side who I never met in my life. And the one time that I was able to see him, he was on his deathbed and unable to talk. But I feel him every day. And that's exactly how he looked. Right? So now she had permission to not feel crazy. She's like, I felt him. When I make my breakfast, I feel him. When I am having a hard time, I feel like he comforts me. So the relationship that they weren't able to have in life, he gave her in the afterlife, right? So things like this where it doesn't make sense to me, I just leave it to Creator. I leave it to Spirit. I leave it to the person that I'm working on to figure it out. And I made a promise as a practitioner that if something comes to me, no matter how crazy, I'm not going to let my ego get in the way. I'm just going to say it. And every single time that I say something, do something, the person's feedback is, this is exactly what I needed?
Okay. I think that I work in an opposite way than you do, which is really interesting, but I get similar
Similar results.
similar results. Because when I do healing work, as I mentioned, I kind of am really good at the dark arts for whatever reason. And I go looking for trouble or something. I am not really necessarily like looking for trouble, but I've heard the people inside call me a shapeshifter or someone who knows how to slip between the cracks. So I don't really get very much word. I kind of just slip in and like sniff around like an animal, I guess. And then we'll find something off and I will like see it out of the corner of my eye and I'll like get it. I can't really talk about it too much to the client because I don't want the client to get freaked out when it's like a curse or a possession or whatever it is. But basically what happens, even when I'm doing ancestral tending, and I find curses and lineages or like possessions throughout lineages, is that I will find whatever is happening that's trying to hide, and then I will witness it. It's really just the act of witnessing and allowing it to be as big and as violent or destructive or difficult as possible while I'm witnessing, and then I try to extend as much compassion as I possibly can to that witnessing. And through the witnessing and allowing of the whatever violence is occurring or whatever difficulty is happening, because they're really the ways human beings have treated each other in the world have not always been kind. Yeah, it's an understatement. And so it's just remembering that there are different points of view to every single action, and to try to see the kindness and the love and the compassion in it. And eventually it unravels in a sort of way, which again, I can't really discuss, but the healing happens and I feel it again somatically through my body. I feel like it's moved and then I can move on.
That sounds like fun, Marwa.
Let's do it together.
Sounds like a ride.
So my practice is very different. It's actually a little bit similar to the Buddhist practice because Korean shamanism is mixed with Buddhism. And so when we have an ancestor passing or a passing of a loved one, there are different kinds of rituals and different types of ceremonies that we can do depending on the timing of their passing. For example, we also have the 49-day ceremony that is done every weekly. And those kind of ceremonies and rituals are very structured. And I like to think of it as a relic of patriarchal times, because a lot of these practices were very focused on respecting the bodies of men and masculine energies. And so the funeral practices of how we approach the bodies of someone who presented as male or presented as female was a little bit different. And so ancestor practice is also reflected in that too as well. For example, when we are looking at more rigid, more structured, like more step-by-step processes, I tend to see those ceremonies as influenced through the Confucian society that's very patriarchal. But when we look at the feminine ancestral practices, it's the little things we do every single day. It's how we wake up, how we tend to ourselves, how we work the kitchen or work with the stove. Because when we work with the ancestors, it's not just blood lineage. It's also extended into the land, but also our homes. Our homes are sacred spaces and can be seen as ancestors. And so ancestors are a very, very big, vast realm. And there's not one single person here that does not have an ancestor. So a lot of people are usually curious or they want to know, are their ancestors are with them? And I would say every single person have ancestors. And kind of going back to what you were saying, where we venerate the ancestors, we send them back and we bring them in, that is that back and forth, what you see is the breath. Because spirit is wind. In shaman, spirit is wind. And us breathing in and out, bringing in energy, taking it out, is us breathing with spirit. And so this has, and so when I do my ancestral work, I do a lot of my traditional stuff, which is like Cheza. Cheza is the ancestral altar and the offerings and doing the whole rituals. But there is a different kind of practice that I bring for diasporas or who may not know these structures or these practices. And we will use our bodies, right, to represent that or to express that.
Maybe I can follow up on that and just ask you a little bit about how your practices in Queens, New York, right? It might be different than if you were in Korea, and maybe also kind of ask you to also think a little bit too about this issue of diaspora or displacement, or because I think there is something right about placement, embodiment. I think you talked about somatic, but also kind of like when you are in the spirit world, or like when things can also move, that's not as tangible. And I wonder if you can kind of reflect on that, and specifically like the challenges of doing work that has these very deep ancestral roots, but in a contemporary moment, in New York City or something like that. I wonder if you could kind of talk about that.
Yeah, so doing shamanism in New York is a different kind of animal. One is obviously supplies and access, right? Because in Korea, we have designated areas and spaces where we could go in for rituals at any given moment. But here in New York, we have to plan things out, right? But also, a lot of the supplies that we use in our practice is limited because one, cost is very high, and two, it costs a lot of money to ship it, takes a lot of time. Sometimes time is not in alignment, right? And so we go back to some of the traditional practices of making our tools, of making our supplies by using simple material like paper or other natural kind of materials, fabric, right? Working with flora, plants are different ways. And so when I go to Korea, the rituals are just a lot more intense, more involved, a lot more people, a lot more hands. But when we are doing rituals here in New York, one of the things that we do different is that we acknowledge the land. Because when we are calling in the spirits and we are calling in the ancestors, we go through the land. And we always start with the land from our roots, which is Korea. But then we also acknowledge the land that we are here, where in New York it was Lenape land, right? And so that is some of the way that we have evolved in our practices. But for me, I also share different ways that diasporas could evolve in their altar practices. A lot of the cheza is done traditionally, like very traditional foods and offerings. But what happens if your ancestors didn't like that? What happens, right? As diasporas, I tell my children, when you do cheza for me, or if you do cheza for me, right? Please do not put traditional Korean food on my altar. I would love some tacos, right? Honestly, right? I cannot take another bowl of bibimbap. I've been eating it all my life after every single rituals that I do, so I must have a different kind of thing on my altar. But that is actually a reflection of our diaspora practices, and the food that nourishes us is a reflection of that. And so when we are doing ancestor altars and offerings, maybe we bring in something else that the ancestors like. So when I go to my grandmother's hanso, like her grave, we pour coffee. Coffee is not traditional food at all, right? And so these are the little ways, right? We can make these connections. These are the little ways. These are acts of remembrance, right? And we bring them into our memories, which also brings it into our bodies, right?
Yeah.
I love that you're challenging patriarchy also. Because it really does infiltrate everywhere, even in shamanism and traditional healing. And that's something that as healers, like we need to heal everything, every aspect. So I just want to applaud you on that. For myself, I'm still on my ancestral continent, so it's really easy to find everything that I need. One thing that my grandmother Alma always taught me is use what you have. So there are a lot of herbs that I use that are not indigenous to my lineage, like rosemary and rue, that we use a lot for women's medicine, right? And there are also invasive herbs that we pull from the root and use the heck out of it because we're bringing balance to the ecosystem. I can't believe sometimes when I hear herbalists say, I hate that plant. It's an invasive species. Like, girl, use it. It's telling you to pull it from the root and use it. These Western herbalists. You got to use it. And so there's that aspect. And then also being indigenous, but also knowing that my lineage is more towards the south. My people are like bordering Texas, or across the border, acknowledging, well, like Aslan Underground says, we didn't cross the borders crossed us. But also the Tongva people, where I'm from in Long Beach, are the original inhabitants of the land. So also being intentional about growing California native plants and using those plants, tending to the land, and being a good neighbor to the Tongva people, participating in their ceremonies and bringing food and supporting the people, asking them if they want to come to my workshops, for free, sponsoring them from, my own pocket because I'm living on their land, so this type of relationship and reciprocity are some of the things that as an indigenous person we're practicing.
All right. Well, for myself, when I go to Egypt, I feel a very strong pull to the land. My grandfather owned farmland there. He was a farmer, and so I always go and I visit that land, and I always get a lot of information from there. But the culture over there is very, I would say, spirit work is not something that's looked upon as something that is, there's a lot of stigma, I guess, about it. When I try to go to investigate or talk to people or, be in that world, there are, my mother would really prefer me not to tell like her siblings that I'm doing it, and that, I kind of have to sneak around, I guess, kind of like my last answer. What I do when I'm in Egypt is mostly like fact collecting, or not in knowledge wise, but just having my feet on the land. And I get a lot of information, and I get a lot of direction as what to do or how to move something. And I don't necessarily get too much in the way of why I'm doing it until I return to California, until I return to, a home or a place where I feel like I can openly do some of these things. And then I go ahead and use it there. A lot of the work that I do in Egypt or for Egypt has to do with ancestral work. And I've been working a lot just kind of like on my lineage, separating out different lineages that have like conquered each other. And so, yeah, it's kind of hard for me to like outwardly show any of that stuff in Egypt.
One interesting thing about cultural exchange that I've experienced is, even though, so for example, a couple weeks ago I was hanging out with the group of Tongva women, and they were teaching me how they weave their baskets. Well, my basket came out to be a tortilla holder. And they were like, cool, you can make a little lid for it. And I was like, I don't know why mine's different. But your ancestors work through you. No matter what, they come through. I did the same thing everyone else did, right? But this cultural exchange, when you approach, there's something very powerful about getting your hands on the land, on nature. And even though I was learning, to make a basket, didn't come out to be a basket, but I was learning how to make a basket. My ancestors worked through me, and I learned how to make tortilleras, which are very useful in my household. And that was the exchange, right?
If I could maybe follow up on that thought about making a basket, something you said earlier, Pānquetzani, about using what you have. In my lineage of Soto Zen Buddhism, there's a 13th century text called Tenzo Kyokun. It means instructions to the cook, and it's about monastic life in a Zen temple where the cook is supposed to have a certain kind of like attitude based on this, the guidance on this text, and the attitude that's supposed to have is that you're supposed to be, number one, vigilant. You're supposed to know and kind of like have an inventory of what are all the vegetables and like in the monastic kitchen. And number two, you're supposed to be able to take what you have and create something that's for the spiritual as well as physical nourishment for all of the spiritual practitioners inside of that space. So it's not about like I'm, master chef, whatever. Like it's you're trying to serve for the, well-being of others, and so it's a text that's a metaphoric text in a way. That's all true. That's what it's supposed to do, but it's also like inventories about you should know who you are. You should know what ingredients you're made up of, including the not so great ingredients and maybe even the rotting ingredients. And you should put up a mirror to yourself. So that's part one. And part two is you're supposed to then do whatever you can with what you have. That a mediocre cook with great ingredients can make a nice meal, but a Zen cook is somebody who can, with not that great ingredients, still create something that's of value to everybody else. And so it's a little bit of creativity, and I think that's where I want to go to next, because I feel like, Marwa, with your artwork here, maybe I could start with you, but then if I could ask the rest of you to also follow on, which is the role of creativity and even art making in your spiritual practice, like how it's connected. I wonder if you can explore that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's very strongly connected for me because I'm an artist. I was clairaudient all of my life, so I just heard invisible voices talking to me all of my life, and I kind of shut it down because I come from a family that wasn't very encouraging of that. And once I started to paint and really learn how to paint and be creative, I couldn't turn it off. It just came through, and I was really good at turning it off, but I just couldn't turn it off. And so the creativity and my spirituality is very linked for some reason. Like I know that because I am trained as an artist, that they come through me in the way, I think that the spirits will come through you in a way that they know that you can have the most, like an action that will work, They're not going to ask me to like sing operatic song or something, But the act of creation itself is, I feel, so important, regardless of what you're doing, because it kind of counterbalances the destruction that's happening in the world today. So just the act of like the more imagination you have and the more creation that you have, and regardless of what you have, like what you have in the kitchen, what I have in my studio. In fact, my spirit guides will ask me to pick up garbage or detritus or stuff that is unused or like people have thrown out, so that I can turn it into something else, because everything is holding so much memory. And you can just activate all of that information just by using your imagination and by using trusting what is around you and using it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been doing art for a couple of years lately, and I've been expanding in performance art. I had an opportunity to do performance art, and art has been able to give me space of stories of expression outside of a rigid structure, coot ceremony stories, because a lot of the songs and a lot of the stories we tell are very structured, right? And they're told a certain way. And then through my art, through performance, through ritual, through art, I get to tell a different kind of story, right? For example, one of the stories that's that's very well known in Korea is the story of Tangun, the god king of Korea, who's the son of Eungyo the bear. And the traditional mythology goes that the Eungyo the bear went into the cave after, like 14 days or so, depending on the story. She was transformed into a woman and prayed under the sandalwood tree or the divine tree and was pregnant with a child. For me, I was able to take that story and change it to my story, right? What is my story and Eungyo's story about? Because I was able to use that as a way to tell my story outside of that rigid container. And my story was that Eungyo the bear did not go through all that in the cave to come out, to bow down at a tree to a male god energy just to have a child, And so I was able to use creativity to explore mythology and also find myself in there and find my own power and agency and my own, just my own power. And I think that was very important for me as a shaman, because as a diaspora, I had to go through a lot in my Mudang practice. I had to break down a lot over and over. And it's where my practice now is, I feel, is a lot closer to my real expression, as opposed to being told what shamanism is because it's governed by traditions and structure.
When I was a kid, we used to spend the night, me and all the grandkids would spend the night at my grandma's house, and she made us grandma special. And it wasn't until recently where I was having a conversation with my son that I realized grandma special was just whatever was in the fridge. So I can tell her she's a Zen cook now. But that example of using anything that she had and making something delicious, we were always like, so good. I love today's grandma special, right? Like just that love that she poured into it showed us so much. I never feel that I don't have the capacity, the tools to help and to heal. I was looking at old pictures of when I was in my early 20s, and I'm literally at a concert giving a sobada, a womb massage, to a woman on the freaking concrete. And it was just like a little rebozo, like I was like, oh my God, her skin's touching the floor. Like the floor's probably cold. But always just kind of using whatever we have and making something great out of it. When I first started teaching workshops, I had a vision. So everything I do is because I had a vision, right? A vision, a calling, literally everything, even with my book, right? So I had a vision of me with a drum, with rattles, and singing over women. And I was like, oh shoot, I'm supposed to teach what I do. I'm supposed to teach self-womb massage. And every time I teach that workshop, I come back to my music, my vibration, my voice, and that creativity has allowed me to help and to heal thousands of people, right? And I never considered myself a creative person, like an artist, but I play several instruments and I sing and I dance. And I was like, oh, you know what? Like healing arts kind of expand into everything that you do. And I'm an artist of sorts.
Yes, you are. Yes, yes, yes.
Fantastic. I'm looking at the time. I want to make sure we expand the circle here and questions.
Do you want to come to the front?
Okay, so I have a question for the panel, and especially for Mudang Jenn, and then another. So I will try to. Okay, so my relationship to ancestral worship comes from passed down from my parents, who born during Japanese occupation, survived the Korean War, and were undercast, teenage single moms, and so their relationship to shamanism is the original folk religion of Korea, which is, yes, very integrated with Buddhism, and is not deity focused, but was for survival. And they're actually they became healers, but I was raised atheist, but with a lot of emphasis on magical thinking as an important theme and principle for survival. So I want that's a question for the panel. So in addition to restoration, what is your experience with respect to channeling ancestral spirits to others for the purpose of survival? And then that's my first question. But I don't want to.
Well, when it comes to survival and channeling ancestors, a lot of times in those situations, in those contexts, for survival, for us to be able to move forward, we have to be able to address and name what we're feeling. And a lot of times what we're going to be addressing is going to be rage, anger, and han. And we need to be able to voice that. We need to be able to speak that, so that it's kind of like an exorcism, right? It's something that we carry, right? And an exorcism or a cleansing is something that we release. But we also have to fill up that space that's now empty. And that, to me, that space that we fill up could be a curiosity of being open to love, something sweet, something that could represent an act of survival or an emotion of survival, is what I feel.
Sorry, I'm trying to think about your question specifically. So you're talking about if I'm in a situation where I'm channeling the ancestors who had to survive, like the survival. I think that in that case, it feels like there needs to be healing in that, like through the body. I think through the body, there needs to be some sort of reconciliation with what happened. Again, like a lot of the work I do is witnessing. So there will be a witnessing of the fear and of the atrocity and of whatever happened there. And then through the body, there will be certain parts of the body or certain blocks that are impacted. And most likely the release will come through either crying or laughter or some sort of like coughing, some sort of release that would need to happen for, let's say if it was your body that's like holding on to that fear, for the fear to kind of like unravel itself and through. And so the ancestors will probably help us in, if I go in and I ask them, they'll show me specifically what had happened to them and the difficulty. And a lot of times I don't actually have to explain that to the client because I don't want to re-traumatize them, but I'll understand exactly where it is, and then I will try to take it from where it is and unravel it and kind of push it through your body so you'll have the release and you no longer have to be holding on to it.
My great-great-grandmother was forced to marry at 14 by the Catholic Church, by a priest, because she was doing her job, saving a little calf, and she got blood on her skirt, and they said, "You're not a virgin, you have to marry this little boy." So she was forced to marry. I am single. I'm not putting myself out there.
Ready to mingle?
Totally sounded like that. Hi. And I make sure that I don't settle. I make sure that whoever I'm going to be with and was in the past, like once they became someone that wasn't for me, I was able to let them go, because through my actions, I heal my ancestors. What they weren't able to accomplish, I make sure, shit, it's hard. It's hard to leave a marriage. It's hard to, right? That shit's hard. But I have to do it not only for me, but for my ancestors who never got the chance to experience freedom the way that they deserved. That and building an altar and always having that veneration for your ancestors, every day having clean water on the altar. My grandmother, she got yelled at by all her 8 kids because she was going out and she was going to downtown LA and getting like fresh roses every day for her altar during COVID. And they were like, "Mom, no, don't do that." She's like, you know, La Virgencita me va a proteger. The Virgin Mary's going to protect me, right? Because it's for her. So, yeah.
So very, very quick question.
Yeah, I give free.
I'm embarrassed to have stood there like
What
I
happened
wasn't.
to the other
and
mic?
actually, this is for the whole panel, I realize. But so the resurgence, you know, and revivalism and recognition of your practices in facilitating ancestral worship as an art practice. Is there a conflict with its foundation as a spiritual practice? And then I'm gone.
I'm going to say no to that. It doesn't form a conflict, because I'll explain why. When we are tapping into something called 신명, Shin means spirit, Myung means life. Shinmyeong is a spiritual force that inspires us, right? And so when we are connecting with Shinmyeong, that means we're connecting with Source, the heaven, but also with our ancestors. And so there's not a conflict at all. Matter of fact, I feel like it comes together even more.
You're asking if there's a conflict between ancestral. Oh. Yeah. Oh, I see.
Art practice, or is there, or, I mean, I'm sorry, the spiritual practice?
Oh, it doesn't at all with mine. In fact, like I was saying, the work in the back is ancestral healing work, and I think that a lot of people, just as Mudang Jenn was saying, a lot of people don't know the amount of ancestors that we have, because there have been so many. There's so much mixture in lineages that we just don't know about, like that were never talked about or said. One of the things that the works do that I have in the back is that they're they're like not identity or culture specific. Because there are so many lineages running through, the important thing that they were saying to me while I was making them was that there's so much responsibility, you know, like there are different people who have so much responsibility for what's happening now. It's not obvious, like the people who are aggressing right now might not only be the obvious aggressors, you know? So what happens is when you look at the paintings, whatever is part of your lineage, even if you know it or you don't know it, then can be put on the responsibility can be put on the different people. And therefore not have to lay on other people's shoulders. And in that way, the ancestral like healing is happening because it's kind of like unraveling the knots like little bit by little bit.
In ancient Mesoamerica, we believe that only two things reach the divine. The first thing is song, and the second one is smoke. So when we sing, when we practice this art, when we play music, it's actually venerating the ancestors and enhancing your prayers.
Other questions? Somebody right here.
There.
Am I allowed to stand up?
You have to stand up. You have to.
I'll stand up. I'll be in front of the
Take
crowd.
space.
Hi, my name is Ina, and I want to start my own spiritual practice using Hanafuda cards or Hatu cards. You can do divination with them. But another question that I have is about womb work, and I experienced an ectopic pregnancy. And so I lost my left fallopian tube 2 years ago. And so my bloodline ends with me, basically. Talking about my ancestors, my grandfather, he was a pastor, but he was part of the military government in Korea. And my father, he was also a lieutenant in the American Army, and he was at the LA riots at that time, so he was activated. And he was also part of the invasion of Panama as well. And so there's like, my family is a military family. And so as the current generation, I'm 24, so I want to redefine my family and how, I guess, pay for the sense of my family, but there's a lot of trauma with war. And especially when talking about Hanafuda cards, with the Japanese internment camps, Hanafuda cards were used in order to connect with Japanese culture, but also Hanafuda cards were spread to Korea because of colonialism. And also these cards were spread to Hawaii because Japanese farmers were working on the plantations in Hawaii and the occupation of Hawaii. And so these cards, they're very niche. Nobody plays them anymore. You only play them on New Year's or Lunar New Year's. And I kind of just want to revive them back through divination, through tarot card reading, and just playing the game in general, both games, the Japanese and Korean game. And so my question is how can I, as the new generation, define spiritual practices? And that's the question for the whole board, basically.
I think for spiritual practice is a journey to understand you. It's a journey to you, if anything, because understanding who you are could also define how your spiritual practice look like, because spiritual practice will be very different from every person. It's an expression of you, your spirits, and your ancestors. And so your spiritual expression, your creativity, and your practice will look very different compared to others. And you really need to honor who you are and the things that you come from and the ancestors you come from. And so comparison will kill you, okay? Do not compare your practices, but I do feel spiritual practice is a journey to you, understanding who you are. And within Korean spirituality, we have three spirits within our soul. And so maybe that's a journey of understanding the different parts of us. That's a reflection of the three sacred realms within our cosmos.
I love how you say you have three spirits, because we believe that we have different animistic forces in our body.
I know you're my sister from another mother.
Thank you. I'm single, by the way, Jen.
I'm free after tonight.
So you said you have one tube left? Okay. And one ovary?
I'm infertile on my left side, basically. And at 6 weeks, they found a heartbeat. And so because of that, I had to get surgery that same day.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for the loss and for your losing your tube and for having to go through the surgery.
Yeah.
So you can still have your own child if you want. So it doesn't end with you. And even if you wanted to adopt, that is still your lineage continuing, because you're infusing that spirit with your love, with your intentions, and with your family traditions. So no matter what, Native people, we don't believe in blood quantum. Like family is family.
Family is family.
Yeah. So there's that. Castor oil packs will help you heal so that you can have a child in the future if you want to. Castor oil packs help dissolve scar tissue, because scar tissue gets sticky and it can travel to the other ovary and the healthy tube. And we don't want it to do that, so that you have the options later. So that's one thing that you could practice every night. You can do 4 nights on, 3 nights off. Castor oil for like 30 minutes.
I mean, I agree with both of them. And I just want to say that, as I kind of touched on before, it was a really hard path for me to choose to be this animistic spiritual practitioner and a person who was following this lineage, because my family was very conservative religiously. But I think that there is a way in which you can both accept your family for what they practice and their beliefs, and step up and say, okay, this is my life, and this is how, this is like the most honest path that I have for it, and this is what I need to stand up for. Like the things that were really important to me, I stood up for. And then I found another family, which is a spiritual family, and people who could support me, who were there for me, supporting me in those ways. That doesn't mean I have to cut off my, bloodlines or family of origin. It's just that when I need support or help, or to further something that is very important to me in that realm, these are the people who are my family, who I depend on.
We have a question on the right here.
Thank you.
Ahead of the game.
Hi, my name is Selene. And my question is just considering the title of this panel, right? The evolution of ancestral spiritual practices. We all are glued to this little rectangular thing that is on everyone's hands or laps, right? So I'm curious, what are your thoughts, feelings, perspectives on the role of technology in pushing forth a feminine perspective on spiritual practices? Because from my own experience of learning from my own ancestors, of healers, and also tracing my lineage to the Aztecs and studying Aztec codices, I stumbled across this database that has just all of these hieroglyphics and everyone else's kind of interpretation of it. But just recognizing how men have dictated what stories are told, how stories are told. And this website is also kind of highlighting, there's all these scholars who've assessed these pictures, and this is what they're defining as what's happening and what this is being said. And so just recognizing the fact that men are deciding this is what it means. I'm curious, what is the role of technology in kind of expanding this access to knowledge of spiritual practices? And yeah, I'll leave it there.
I mean, so your body is technology. Your body is a source of technology. It holds ancient wisdom passed down from ancestors. It's a body of technology, of learned and understanding energies. And so I do feel that when we are using our body as a source of technology or as a tool, right, that means it's our job to be curious and to investigate what that looks like and the different ways it can hold us or the different ways it can carry us.
I created the first online school for Indigenous people, for Indigenous healing, back in 2012, and no one was doing that. I had a background in film, of course, performance, editing, so I was able, it was back when it was hard, now it's so easy. And so I believe in indigenous futurism. What can we do to use technology for our benefit, for our good? Because for too long, it's been used against us to harm us and to harm other indigenous peoples on their lands. So what kind of healthy relationship can we develop with technology so that we're coming out winning? Also, don't use your phone too much.
Well, I think that technology really freaks me out, honestly. But, you know, and anytime I go in and do trances for myself, I always feel like I'm solidly on team human. You know, like there's some part of me that's like earth and human, like I am here, I'm like, what can I do? But I also know that I don't know what the future is going to bring, and I don't really know how human beings or the earth or anything that we're doing is going to evolve. You know, I kind of, I think that we have to have enough humility to understand that we don't understand anything. We can just sit in the knowledge that we have today and what we have. And I try to make moves that make me feel like this is going towards a place where I am comfortable. It really is like processing through the body and seeing. Because I have actually, in my trances, started to see some more mechanical things coming through. And as much as I would love to fight it and just believe like, oh yeah, you know, this is just a phase and technology is just gonna, you know, it's just gonna be this thing that's gonna crash and burn. I don't necessarily think that that's the case. And I don't know what the evolution is going to look like, but I do know that I'm always given hope, and I'm always told that just as like you sit in the present, and that's really the only moment you have, if I just work with what I have in these bite-sized pieces, I will know what to do.
I have been warned that we're a little bit over time. And so I want to thank everybody here. The questions, the answers. So I think we got a really good sense of all of the three of you, your characters, your way of doing the work. And hopefully that was a mirror back to all of you who, you know, are probably doing the work in your own way as well. So let's continue the conversation until they do kick us out. But, you know, I'm sure our three panelists would be happy to entertain further questions and conversations. So thank you so much for coming, and we'll close it formally now, but have a hopefully informal time to continue the conversation.